Welcome to one of the most chilling chapters in literary history. Today, we're exploring the ghostly encounters connected to the famous Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne. Every account you're about to hear comes from documented reports, newspaper articles, and eyewitness testimonies spanning over a century. What makes these tales even more unsettling is that the sisters themselves were fascinated by the supernatural. From their isolated parsonage in Yorkshire to a mansion on Long Island, the spirits of these literary legends seem to have found ways to reach beyond the grave. These are their stories. The Bronte family lived in the remote village of Haworth in Yorkshire, England, during the 1800s. Charlotte, Emily, and Anne grew up in a grey stone parsonage that sat right next to a graveyard filled with thousands of unmarked graves. Their father was the local minister, but he was a distant man who spent most of his time alone in his study. The girls' mother died when they were very young, leaving them to raise each other. From childhood, the sisters were drawn to dark stories and supernatural tales. Their servant, Tabby Ackroyd, filled their heads with local ghost stories and legends from the Yorkshire moors. Their aunt Branwell shared eerie Cornish folklore that had been passed down through generations. These early encounters with the supernatural would later inspire their famous novels like Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. But what the world didn't know was that the sisters' connection to the spirit world was about to become much more personal. Of all the Bronte sisters, Emily was the one who loved home the most. She hated being away from Haworth and the wild, windswept moors that surrounded their village. Even as an adult, she would walk alone across these desolate hills for hours, often in terrible weather. Local people thought she was strange, but Emily felt most alive when she was wandering those empty landscapes. After her brother's funeral, Emily caught a severe cold that quickly developed into an inflammation of the lungs. She died on the 19th of December 1848 at just 30 years old, refusing medical help until her final day. But according to multiple witnesses, death didn't keep her from the moors she loved so much. In 1959, the Illustrated London News reported something that sent chills through the literary world. The ghost of Emily Bronte had been seen walking the long, rough path from Haworth Parsonage to the ruins of a farmhouse called Top Withens. People described seeing a tall, thin figure moving across the moors with long, confident strides. She appeared exactly as her friend Mary Robinson had described her in life, a girl who looked queenly in her best clothes, but loose and boyish when she walked the moors. Witnesses said she would whistle to invisible dogs and take those same long steps over the rough ground that she had taken when she was alive. But Emily's spirit wasn't just seen on the moors. For much of the 20th century, there were reports of a mysterious grey lady appearing in an old weaver's cottage on West Lane in Haworth. This cottage, which later became the Toby Jug Cafe, had a regular visitor that no one could explain. The ghost always appeared dressed in a long grey dress with a bonnet and shawl. She carried a basket on her arm as if she was going to visit someone. The apparition was small and frail, and she would smile and giggle before walking up a staircase that no longer existed. The cafe owner, Keith Ackroyd, became so disturbed by these visits that he asked the local priest to perform an exorcism. The church refused, but Ackroyd was convinced this was Emily's spirit. Some experts doubt this was really Emily, though. The description didn't match her. Emily was actually the tallest of the three sisters, and she rarely went into the village when she was alive. She preferred the wild, open spaces where no one could bother her. Still, the sightings continued for decades, and many locals remained convinced they were seeing the ghost of the woman who wrote Wuthering Heights. Charlotte Bronte was different from her sisters. While Emily loved staying home, Charlotte had a deep desire to see the world. She travelled whenever she could, visiting friends and exploring new places. One of her favourite destinations was the village of Hathersage in Derbyshire, where she stayed with her friend Ellen Nussey in the summer of 1845. Charlotte fell in love with Hathersage immediately. The beautiful Peak District village became the inspiration for Morton in her famous novel Jane Eyre. She met the Eyre family who lived at Northlees Hall and their name became the surname of her most famous character. But Charlotte's connection to Hathersage would prove to be stronger than anyone imagined, strong enough to draw her spirit back decades after her death. Charlotte died on the 31st of March, 1855, along with her unborn child, and just 3 weeks before her 39th birthday. In February 1927, nearly 70 years after Charlotte's death, newspapers reported something extraordinary. Charlotte Bronte's ghost had been appearing at Hathersage vicarage on an annual basis. The vicar's children claimed they saw her regularly, and her presence terrified the family dog so much that it would cower and whine whenever she appeared. The reports described a figure in Victorian dress who seemed to be searching for something or someone. Some people believed she was returning because she had been in love with Reverend Henry Nussey, Ellen's brother, who had proposed to her. Charlotte had rejected his proposal, but perhaps her spirit felt differently about the decision. The story became so widespread that it reached the national press. Reporters wrote that Charlotte's ghost seemed drawn to this place because she had found peace at Hathersage, unlike the misery she often felt at home in Haworth. The Psychic Society even offered to investigate the haunting, but their request was turned down. However, the story took an interesting turn a month later. The Reverend J.H. Brookbank spoke to the press to deny all the claims. He said the idea that he and his family had seen Charlotte's ghost was completely ridiculous. But newspaper reporters noted something curious. While the vicar was quick to dismiss the sightings, he never explained why the family dog continued to show signs of terror at certain times and places in the house. The denials didn't stop the sightings, though. For years afterward, visitors to Hathersage reported seeing a woman in Victorian dress walking near the vicarage, especially during the evening hours. She appeared most often in the summer months, around the time when Charlotte had visited the village in 1845. Anne Bronte's ghost story is perhaps the most remarkable of all because it involves a spirit that apparently travelled 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. Anne was the youngest of the 3 writing sisters, and her first job was as a governess for the Ingham family at Blake Hall in Mirfield, Yorkshire. Blake Hall was a grand estate, but Anne's time there was miserable. The Ingham children were spoiled and difficult to manage, and Anne felt powerless to discipline them properly. She later wrote about these horrible experiences in her novel Agnes Grey, where she transformed the Inghams into the awful Bloomfield family. After just 9 months, Anne was dismissed from her position. Blake Hall stood for over a century after Anne left, but in the 1950s, the aging mansion became too expensive to maintain. The family decided to demolish it and sell everything piece by piece at auction. Buyers came from all over the world to bid on the grand fixtures and fittings. The most impressive piece was the hall's staircase, carved from beautiful yew wood. This staircase had been the architectural highlight of the mansion, and it was purchased by Alan Topping, a wealthy American who lived on Long Island, New York. Topping was building a new house in Quogue and wanted something special for his entrance hall. The staircase was carefully dismantled, shipped across the Atlantic, and rebuilt in the Topping mansion. Everything seemed normal until September 1962, when Alan's wife Gladys had an encounter that would change everything. Gladys Topping was at home when she saw a woman descending the Blake Hall staircase. The figure had her hair pulled back in a bun and wore a long, full skirt with a triangular shawl. Her expression was thoughtful and pensive, as if she was deep in contemplation about something important. Mrs. Topping's dog immediately became agitated, backing away from the staircase and whining. When Gladys spoke gently to calm the animal, something amazing happened. The ghostly figure turned and smiled at her before fading away completely. But this wasn't a one-time event. The spectral woman appeared several more times over the following months, always on the same staircase, wearing the same Victorian clothing. Mrs. Topping became convinced that she knew who this spirit was. When she asked in her mind who the figure might be, she received what she believed was a clear answer: Anne Bronte. The sightings continued for years, always featuring the same pensive young woman in Victorian dress. Mrs. Topping, whose husband had founded a successful hardware business in Manhattan, had no reason to make up such a story. She genuinely believed that Anne Bronte had become the only member of her family to make it to America, even if it was only in spirit form. The ghostly encounters with the Bronte sisters weren't limited to visual sightings. In the 1930s, a family conducting séances claimed to make direct contact with Emily's spirit at Haworth Parsonage itself. They reported placing paper on the very table where the sisters used to write their novels and receiving messages through automatic writing. According to their account, Emily's ghost told them about a blue dress that was still kept in the Bronte house. When they investigated, they actually found such a dress in the museum's collection, a bright blue garment with floral patterns that museum authorities couldn't identify as belonging to any specific sister. Even more famous was the claim by Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, that she had made contact with Charlotte Bronte's spirit through séances. Stowe told George Eliot that Charlotte had communicated from beyond the grave, saying she was waiting in heaven's antechamber. These psychic encounters added another layer to the mystery surrounding the Bronte sisters' spirits. It seemed that their restless souls were reaching out through every possible means: visual appearances, automatic writing, and spiritual communication. What makes these ghost stories even more chilling is that the Bronte sisters had their own supernatural experiences while they were alive. Charlotte documented one particularly eerie encounter from her teenage years. On June 22, 1830, she wrote about a strange occurrence at the parsonage that involved meeting a mysterious stranger who seemed to predict their father's death. The sisters grew up surrounded by death and mystery. Their parsonage sat next to a graveyard containing thousands of unmarked graves. They lost their mother and two older sisters to illness when they were very young. The surviving siblings, Charlotte, Emily, Anne, and their troubled brother Branwell, all died within a few years of each other, leaving only their father Patrick to mourn them all. The Bronte sisters' novels dealt with themes of love, loss, isolation, and the supernatural. Characters like Heathcliff and Catherine in Wuthering Heights seem to exist somewhere between life and death, while Jane Eyre is filled with mysterious happenings and unexplained phenomena. Perhaps the sisters were simply continuing their storytelling from beyond the grave. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the stories of the Bronte sisters' spirits remind us that some people leave such a powerful mark on the world that their presence continues to be felt long after they're gone. In quiet Yorkshire villages, on windswept moors, and even in faraway American mansions, the ghosts of Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Bronte seem to be telling us that some stories, and some storytellers, are truly eternal. Thank you for watching. Good night.